Did. Oh, there we're live.
Oh, we are live. Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining this little breakout session, which is a dozen ways to ditch your excuses. And whether you are a librarian who works, with a fellow librarian, or you have some assistants, or you're chatting with your administration, it's easy to line up a list of reasons why a maker space is a bad idea for a library. And what I'd like to do is address some of those different excuses that not only I have felt, but that I've heard from people who work in my library and who work in my building. And I want to talk you out of those excuses and give you some reasons why you can go ahead and just ditch that excuse. So we'll do those dozen, and then if there are questions at the end, we've left about 5 minutes at the end of the session just for some Q&A stuff. So you can put your questions or your comments in the chat, and my moderator Lissa will be keeping an eye on that chat and sharing all of those things with me at the end. So let me share my slides with you, and you have those as well if you want to take a look at them as we go through. If you are just joining late, I'll take a minute to just kind of introduce myself. You can find me on Twitter at Dr. K. Matson. If you'd like to contact me by email, you can get me at mrskmatson@gmail.com. And I would love to just further connect with you about things that you are doing in your library and, just answer any questions that you might have about makerspaces or really anything else. Um, my role at Wabansie Valley High School is pretty new. It's only my second year in that school library, but prior to that, I was a school librarian for 2 years at a high school and a classroom teacher for 6 at a middle school. And my makerspace experience really started last year when moving into Wabansie Valley. I did a really large renovation. The PTA was incredibly involved and excited with that renovation and started asking if they could support us financially in some different ways. And so we started off with about a $3,000 grant from our PTA to just get some really basic makerspace kits. And I didn't know what those kits were going to mean for our space, and I didn't really know how we were going to manage it all. But you don't say no to money, and I didn't. So those $3,000 bought us some tech tools, and the rest has kind of evolved from there. Like I said earlier, I teach at Wabansie Valley High School, which is a high school of about 2,600 students in Indian Prairie 204, and I am the only school librarian there. I've been a member of Islama for the last 2 years and have really enjoyed the experiences that I have gotten being a part of this group. The Illinois School Library Media Association provides many opportunities for school librarians to connect and collaborate and share ideas. Our Islamic community consists of a very active listserv and social media presence on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. In addition to supporting our colleagues, the Illinois School Library Media Association also cultivates and fosters a love of literature through the Reader's Choice Awards for Illinois students in kindergarten through 12th grade. And those Reader's Choice Awards are just amazing for us. We rely on those every year as a reading promotional material. And so if you aren't familiar, I would encourage you to check out that information at islama.org. So let's first talk about some excuses. The first excuse that I heard was space. We don't have room for a makerspace. We have, too much stuff in this library already. And the way that you just have to kind of get over that excuse is to not be afraid to sort of declutter and rearrange. When I started at Wabansie Valley, the first thing I did was to weed nearly 10,000 books from our collection. And those 10,000 books were old. Some of them had not been checked out since before I was born. But it really just took somebody to say, yeah, we're going to commit to cleaning out and to roll up their sleeves and to get the work done. And in that decluttering process, we were able to rearrange our furniture as well. And so this corner that you were looking at with some empty shelving is now sort of our maker corner, and we were able to replace some empty shelving with tables and some display furniture and cabinets to lock our maker materials up in. And that wouldn't have been possible had we not taken the time first to really sort of get rid of what we didn't need before bringing in the new stuff. And there's another picture of that same corner now with tables and kids engaged in projects that used to be taken up by bookshelves. The other thing that you can think about with space is some creative alternatives to how you have your maker space running. Maybe a permanent space is not ideal for you. There are lots of librarians who are turning old book carts into maker spaces on wheels. This is especially popular at the elementary school level, where you can just take your makerspace wherever you need to go. If you need to take it into a classroom or set up for a parent night event, the makerspace on a cart is a great way to get started without having to sort of do a ton of work and dedicate a formal space to your makerspace. I absolutely love this picture. This is from Gwyneth Jones, who is the daring librarian that you may have read her blog or followed her on Twitter. She took some existing study carols that she already had in her library and put a spring loaded shower curtain in that study carol. And that shower curtain was loaded up with duct tape. And they now have a little duct tape crafting cubby made out of furniture that they already had in their library. I can envision doing something similar with like ribbon or yarn or anything else on a spool without having to move anything. Pretty inexpensive solution to make a little space for kids to craft. You may also want to consider utilizing wall space or the ends of your shelving units. This person, and I'm sorry, I forget where I found this image, just took pegboard that you can buy at Lowe's or Home Depot and glued it onto the side of their shelves. You could also mount it on your wall, but then your pegboard, you can put all these different hooks in, and you can see that she's got hooks for her markers and her scissors and her tape. And so this is a way that you can create a place for all your stuff without having to take up room on the floor. So search up Pinterest, like, makerspace ideas. Check out the Future Ready Librarians Facebook group. People are sharing tons of ideas like these every day that you can grab onto and use in your own space. So another excuse that we hear besides space is time. And this was kind of one of my big fears, honestly, with the makerspace, was that I didn't have time to devote to just being in that space all day long. I am the only librarian in a building of 2,600 students. I'm teaching classes. I'm, running around supporting my teachers. I couldn't devote my entire day to being in a makerspace teaching kids how to use the different tools that were there. So I found that some self-starting resources are really all that kids need. And this is what helps develop that heart of the makerspace that I talked about in the opening session. Because if I'm going to sit down and tell a kid exactly where to connect which little bit and how to turn that into a remote control car, I have taken away all of those opportunities for kids to be curious, to be problem solvers, to be self-starters. But at the same time, just putting a box of wires in front of kids can be incredibly intimidating. So I used a tool called Canva, and these are actually available on my website as well. If you want to just go and print them out and reuse them, you're more than welcome to. I just, like, on Canva, created these little pamphlets that just say, what is a hummingbird kit? And it gives them a couple of ideas of what they can do with it. If you flip over any of these pamphlets onto the back, there are website URLs that they can go and learn more. So the Hummingbird website is fabulous, but if you're a kid and you don't know that it's there, why would you go there? So my pamphlet tells them to go there. So these self-starting resources allow kids to dive into the makerspace on their own without me having to be there to hold their hand along the way. And they're also really helping foster all of that creativity, problem solving, collaboration, because they're really figuring it out together too. So you saw the Sphero challenges in the last session as well. If you have Spheros, you know that they can be driven pretty much like a little remote control car. And that was my biggest oops when I put out our Spheros for the first time. The kids figured out that they could really just drive it around like a remote control car. And there was no learning there. But until I gave my kids opportunities to actually learn how to code, and I gave them a reason to learn how to code, we didn't see the coding happening. So all of these different resources that you can provide in your makerspace can help kids get started without you having to sit down and give direct instruction on the resource. The other piece with time, I think it can be a little bit intimidating to envision that you have this makerspace that now is just up and running, and it's always busy and it's always active. And I work in a library where I have 2.5 assistants, and my 2 assistants are full-time. My half-time assistant splits her week between me and the middle school across the street. And so there are 2 days a week where I am short a body. And when I'm short a body, it can be very hard to have lots of different activities happening in the library at the same time. So consider starting small with your makerspace. It does not have to be, 5 days a week every time kids are in the classroom or in your library space. Last year we started, our makerspace was only open 2 days a week. There are other times where it just kind of gets overwhelming and life is crazy, and we pack up all the little technology and we put out a sign like this one. It's Throwback Thursday. Grab a board game to play at your table. We'll bring our new tech toys out again tomorrow. And they love that too. So it doesn't have to be all the time, and it doesn't have to be so full blown. This year I've really started doing like project of the month type things where I will just feature a particular tech tool like our hummingbird kits, and that's sort of like our featured kit for the month. It helps me feel a little more control over what's happening in the makerspace, but it also helps kind of force kids to explore all of the different things that we've purchased and not just kind of get stuck in a rut with one thing that they have, come to enjoy. So consider, featuring a project of the month, or consider having your makerspace only open a couple days a week. That is perfectly good way to get started. Tip number 5 is expertise, and I feel this on a daily basis, and I've heard librarians say this too. Do you know how to code? Do you know anything about robotics? What's an Arduino board? I've asked myself all of those questions. And then I kind of had this moment where I thought, okay, I don't know how to use every tool, but I also haven't read every book in my library. And does that keep me from putting those books on the shelf? And the answer is no. Because really, a makerspace isn't about me and what I can teach, it's about choice and free exploration for the kids. So I've kind of shifted my mindset into thinking that I can only offer things to the kids that I'm an expert in. And I've now tried to shift and think about myself as a model of lifelong learning. And when I can go into the makerspace and see kids with an Arduino board and say, hey, can you teach me a little bit about that? I'm empowering them as owners of knowledge. I am also modeling what it's like to be a lifelong learner. And I'm not withholding experiences from them because I'm too afraid of not knowing the answer. So it's okay to not know. You also have to remember with expertise that you're not the only facilitator in your library. You saw lots of examples in my opening message about kids helping kids. This guy in the purple over here on the left, his name's Jazz. He's a champion chess team member who went to state this year. And we purchased 6 chessboards at the start of the year, and kids, I quickly came to realize, didn't really know how to play chess. They wanted to learn. Um, I hadn't played chess since middle school. I wasn't going to be the best teacher. But Jazz has taken it upon himself to be like our resident chess tutor. And he cracks me up because he bounces around from table to table and game to game and gives kids tips about where they're going to move, or what they should be thinking about. Kids will call Jazz over now and be like, "Hey, Jazz, what do you think of this move? Is it a good idea?" And to see him sort of interact with kids at all different grade levels, kids that might not have been sort of in his friend group, he's building relationships and rapport with so many students in our library because of his chess expertise. And he feels amazing because he's sharing his knowledge with others. Um, Again, I see a lot of collaboration in my makerspace. One kid will figure something out, pull in his friend, teach his friend how to do the same thing that he's just figured out how to do. Um, the pictures in the lower left are from a pilot that we did last year with Z Space. It's a piece of technology that it's a little bit of like an augmented reality. You put on some glasses, you have a pen, there's all these models that you can sort of manipulate. And we decided not to purchase a Z Space. But while we were doing the pilot for about 4 months, I said, man, I cannot just sit down and dedicate myself to this Z Space for 4 months. So you see this boy in the blue shirt, his name's Dan. I kind of gave him the here's how you get started with Z Space tutorial. And I said, you're my guy. And so he went from, just kind of sitting in the chair and showing all the other kids, hey, here's how the Z space works, and really controlling it, to moving into this guide on the side role. And this is Laura Nyland. She works at our district office, and she came over to see what the Z space was all about. And to see Dan move from this place where he was just going to be in control and kind of model things, to move into this teaching role where he realized he had to facilitate other people's learning. It was so cool to watch. So give kids those opportunities to be the expert, and you can stop worrying about being the only expert in the room. You heard me talk about Natalie and her crocheting. Sometimes I don't have to even assign kids to be experts. They have a talent or an expertise that they want to share, and all you have to do is be willing to listen and provide that space and that support. So, excuse number 8 that I hear all the time is funding. How am I going to get money to purchase all of these things when I barely have money to keep my collection fresh? I am a huge fan of grant writing. I am not in a Title I school, so I have a difficult time getting grant money from large external organizations because they see that we have maybe 30% of our population on free and reduced lunch. We don't have the huge amounts of poverty that are present in other schools. So I've turned to local funding, partnered extensively with my PTA. These two boys, Dan was my Z Space guy that you saw in the last slide, and John were senior architect students last year who actually are both in college this year in architecture fields. They took some time with me this last year and put the entire library into CAD software and helped me figure out how we were going to rearrange that space. And when they started coming up with all of these great ideas, we started talking about money and how much certain renovations were going to cost. And the boys put together this wonderful presentation, went to our PTA meeting and said, here's what we would like from our high school library. Is this something that the PTA can help support? And our PTA has been wonderful, provided us with $13,000 last school year to be able to make lots of renovations. So it doesn't have to be this huge, big formal grant process. If you're lucky enough to get some national grants, that's fantastic. But I would also encourage you to just really start small and start local. Share your story, share your desires, share your needs, and you'll be surprised how willing people are to kind of step in to support you. We also have a local granting organization called the Indian Prairie Education Foundation. They solely exist to raise money in our community to give right back to our schools. And they've supported us 2 years in a row with grant dollars as well. So, again, very local, small organization. But keep your eyes out for those opportunities to share your story and to ask, because you are the advocate for your space. You can also get pretty creative with funding. I was worried in our makerspace how we were going to keep up with the consumable materials that our kids were going through. I got three 3D printers for free from a company who was looking for a tax write off, but the spools of 3D thread were like $60 each. And I thought, well, shoot, how am I going to buy new spools once these spools run out? So we put a Starbucks cafe in our library, and it is a product from Aramark Beverage Service. They loan us their machine. We don't even rent the machine, they just come in and bring it to you. But we purchase their products, which are like hot chocolate and tea and coffee, and we sell these products at our circulation desk for $1. And the product itself costs us about 70 cents. So every time a student buys a drink from our Starbucks cafe, we make 30 cents. That all of that money goes right back into our makerspace, our consumable materials, the crochet yarn that you saw, glue and tape and all of those things that I'm never going to be able to reuse. I've also really gotten into upcycling this year. When we weeded our collection, I hung on to lots of books because I had seen some really cool projects where you could take a book and turn it into a work of art. And so this was Thanksgiving time. We had kids turn a weeded book into a turkey centerpiece. But I've also kind of kept an eye out for projects that I can use with like our old newspapers and our old magazines. So we made Christmas tree centerpieces out of magazines this year, and we made little tiny gift boxes out of old Christmas cards. And so if you think about ways that you can take what you already have in your library and turn it into something new, you don't have to worry about finding money to buy things to put in your makerspace. um I just found this on Pinterest and I was super excited. It is jewelry made out of components of old remotes, and I was so excited because we were cleaning out our back storage room, and I found a box with about 50 remote controls in it. And the tech people were offering to take it to the recycling center, and I said, no, just hold on a second, I might be able to do something with these things. So I did some searching and found all of these cool jewelry pieces that you can make out of recycled remote controls. So I now have a huge box of remote controls behind my desk that we're going to try to turn into a makerspace project this spring. So, think about ways that you can recycle what you already have so that you don't have to go out and buy new all of the time. When we think about resources and money as well, I would encourage you to really check your shelves. When I went through this huge weeding process, I found so many books that were integrated into our nonfiction section that our kids really didn't know were there, and I really didn't know were there either. We had books on like how to draw manga and how to make these little amigurumis, which are made out of crochet, and we had books about duct tape crafts, and we had books about, I don't know, all sorts of things. Origami. They were there. Our kids weren't checking those books out and going home and making origami and making duct tape wallets. But when I pulled those books out and I made a section just for maker books, and I paired those maker books with the materials that kids would need to actually make the projects inside of the books, we had so many projects that were ready to roll, simply because we checked our shelves and pulled out some of the things that we already had and made them a lot more explicit and available to kids. I would also encourage you to check out a subscription service for resources. I now am a subscriber to Creation Crate, which is a monthly box that shows up in my library with a project, a unique project in it every month. When I got my first grant, I just bought a bunch of stuff. And some of that stuff has been super successful. And unfortunately, other stuff is just kind of sitting unused because it wasn't a hit with my kids. The Creation Crate now, I can get a project in the mail every month and see if it's a hit with my kids. And if it is, that's awesome because I know now where I can spend some of my dollars wisely to duplicate what came in my Creation Crate. There are other subscription services like this called Thimble and Hacker Boxes. I don't have as much experience with those, but they're very similar in that they send you everything you need for a project each month, and it's a way that you can kind of see what your kids are going to enjoy with very little money or commitment. I would also encourage you to just ask. Don't be afraid to put your needs out there. I sent an all staff email right before Christmas time to all of the teachers in my school, asking them for things that they no longer needed that we wanted to repurpose. So we got old Christmas cards and, um, you know, white tube socks and jewelry, and you would not believe what people showed up in my library with. These people were like, "Oh my gosh, I've been meaning to clean out my craft closet forever. Thank you for inspiring me to get it done." And I have more craft materials than I'm going to need for a very long time because people were more than happy to help and bring in the resources that they had at their houses that they just didn't need. So I would encourage you to think about ways that you can kind of ditch the excuses and look for solutions. Um, I'm sure that the excuses that you heard in this presentation are ones that you've felt before or that you have heard maybe your assistants or your teachers say. And so hopefully now you've got a couple of ways that you can kind of help people see that those excuses can really be squashed. So, Lissa, did we have any questions that came across the chat
Um,
while we were
a
presenting?
few. So Stephanie wanted to know, do you ever teach classes that incorporate the makerspace, or is it more self-directed area for kids to come in when they have free time?
Yeah, so it really started off as this self-directed area. We have lunch periods that are flexible in our buildings, so our students have 42 minutes out of their day where they can be in the cafeteria, they can be in our academic resource centers, or they can be in the library. So I have upwards of 130 students in my library each
Wow.
lunch period of our day. And so they really started off as these self-starter things. What has evolved has been very cool. There's now a group of students that call themselves Wide Eyes Academy, and it's kids that are really, really excited about science and technology, and they are bringing middle school students from our feeder schools in for an after school club, and they're teaching the kids how to use all the tools that we have in this after school club. As more and more teachers are seeing what's available, I'm starting to get questions about, hey, do you think that we could maybe bring this in for a lesson? Or how many of those resources do you have? Because I saw this really cool activity that I'd like to try. So, what started as a very self directed thing, word has now spread, and teachers are starting to see ways that they can connect the materials in with their curriculum. So, it's kind of like a what comes first, the chicken or the egg kind of a thing. I don't think there's a right or a wrong way to start, whether it's with a specific class in mind or whether it's with self-directed tools, because I think that eventually it's going to blur and you're going to get some of each.
All right. The rest were just all positive comments.
Cool. We're getting some wrap it up messages
Yep.
over here from our Islama director. So we're going to log out and you guys are going to be able to jump into your second breakout session. Thank you so much for joining us.